I'm Tangelene. I've been playing piano since I was about 2 or 3. I'd always been really curious about music, just about the world and about film. And so, I kind of went about my life and thought, maybe I'll go to school for either film or music, because I had some aspirations of maybe being a director as well. So my first year of college, I went to this school called Hampshire College, where I kind of dabbled around with a bunch of different subjects, film, music. And then I finally realized I wanted to marry the two together. So I went, and then I moved over to Berklee College of Music in Boston. And I studied film scoring there, and then eventually graduated and moved to Los Angeles, started working for Hans Zimmer and his company. And yeah, over the years, I kind of just started getting opportunities to, work for other composers, doing like additional music, some score prep, various technical skills. And then eventually I started landing a couple of my own projects, like some stuff for Disney animation, Disney live action. And then eventually I got to where I am now, and then got my first show on Warrior Nun and various other projects. I'm so fortunate to be where I am now.
I was wondering how Netflix decided to release the score that you made as a soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Like, was that something that you negotiated with them? Because they didn't do one for season 1.
Yeah, I think I can talk about it. A lot of times it's kind of like, it's a discussion. And from what I've heard from other composers, it's either the composer gets a soundtrack or they don't get a soundtrack. And I feel like each project is very specific. So you don't always know why. But all I do know is that I did get one, and I'm very fortunate that I did, because it is definitely more rare nowadays.
We are very fortunate as well.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
You said that you got involved with the Warrior Nun project, like in pre-production. What is the normal time frame that you have to make new scores for other projects you have?
I was really fortunate to have gotten on so early. Not all projects have that kind of grace period, like of getting on so early. I've been on other projects recently where I've gotten on after everything's been edited for the most part. So that's even quicker, because once you get into the actual scoring, it moves really, really fast. So that was the nice part about Warrior Nun, is I was able to get scripts early. I started the discussion when Simon was still location scouting, but I didn't start, receiving scripts till a little later than that. But yeah, not all projects give me the chance to get on early, just because everyone gets to score at a different part in their production. Either they really make it a priority and want to get a composer on early, or there's other things that they have to do, and for various reasons they'll get a composer on like right at the tail end. So I find that it's kind of both extremes. It's either I'm on pretty early or on right towards the end.
Do you have a hard time when you watch movies or TV shows to not create your own theme while you're watching them?
No, I feel like just because I'm such a film lover in general, I'm always watching it for the experience, as like another viewer. But of course I do notice like if I like the music or if I don't like the music.
Okay.
That definitely stands out to me.
So we know that in some interviews you said that you were a fan of Warrior Nun before you actually got the job. So we were wondering, how early on did you watch the show? Did you did you become a fan of it when you heard about the job opportunity, or was it even before that?
Yeah, it was kind of a mixture of both. Like, I rewatched it a bunch of times once I heard about the opportunity, that's when I was like doing the repeating of watching. And then that's when I noticed, you know, just even more details and just how much depth was in the story, how much like how important the lore is, and just that it needed to keep going, like for more than one season, of course. But yeah, I would say when I heard about the show is when it got to like the binging period.
So do you work with an orchestrator, or I guess, you know, did you on this project in particular? We all know that you could probably do all of the elements yourself, but just in terms of time and constraints, did an orchestrator help? And it'd also be wonderful if you could just tell us a little bit about maybe some of the other roles that are in the music department that are involved with, you know, getting your score from the production to its final stage.
So I orchestrated this myself, but I also do like working with orchestrators. I have a great friend, and this is also like an awesome thing for you, Coco, because you're still in school, for like making sure you maintain your friends and your connections and keep those strong, because my orchestrator that normally does stuff, he works for Disney now, and we were like really good friends in college, and we had a lot of, you know, really intense experiences with, you know, all-nighters, and it's great that we're still close, and that I still have that strong connection. So that's definitely something I love to put out there, is keep close to your friends in college. But for this project, I featured my friend who's the solo violinist on the score. I had her all over the score, especially for Adriel. So that was a really fun experience because we're really close as well. So I would record her in my studio, and it'd be fun to guide her and explain the scenes and kind of go into detail as to like what type of performance to bring. And I love to be really descriptive on my notation and my sheet music for her. Like instead of just using traditional words, you know, I'd be like yearning, or just adding certain words, like whatever words I want to describe the scene. I like to do that just to add something different. Other parts of the music, music editor, Kevin Crahan was my music editor, and he is great because especially in TV or feature films, it's just a lot of work for the composer. So they are in all the spotting sessions, taking spotting notes, and putting together spreadsheets of all the different cues and naming all the cues, so that I can spend more of my time composing and just getting right to it and not having to do as much of that kind of work. I still do like love to take notes, but it's nice to have that other person there to help. And he's also the one delivering all my cues for approval, putting everything to QuickTimes, adjusting the mix levels for the QuickTimes to send to Simon. And then he's also responsible for delivering the files to the dub stage. And the dub stage is basically where they adjust the final mix, all the different elements like the dialogue, sound effects, the score, the licensed tracks, and so on. So he's one delivering those files, and he's kind of that second person to communicate with the dub stage if they need anything else. And then I'm going really in detail about music editors, but I feel like they really deserve the credit because they do a lot of work. And the other great thing about music editors is with special effects, because a lot of times I don't get all the final special effects or visual effects. So it's nice because down the line, when we get all the final visual effects, sometimes it will shift the timing ever so slightly, or certain scenes might change a bit. So that is great for the music editor to take care of. So I don't have to go back to my session, adjust things, because I've already delivered all my final deliverables for the dub stage. So those are things that my music editor can take care of to my audio stems, which is all the individual sections that I deliver to the dub stage. So he can just make adjustments to those audio files. So that's why I love music editors.
Let me jump in and ask a question about that. When
Sure.
Simon told you that he wanted the end scene with Ava and Beatrice spread out more, was that before it went to dub?
So it was after, I believe that was after. So in that case, what did I do? I think what I had done was, because I love talking so technical about this, because it was like an added melodic part on top, I wasn't really changing the music that was already there. I was mainly adding. So I think I just delivered a couple additional stems to Kevin, and then Kevin would give it to the mixers, the dub mixers, to add into the session. So it was pretty easy in that sense, just giving sending a couple extra files. Music editors totally deserve more credit. And I always try to tell productions the importance of music editors, because not all times they get to work on projects. I mean, a lot of times they do, but not in all cases. But I think they should always be working on projects. Yeah, there is something about, you know, having orchestrators and mixers and definitely having more people involved, so that composers can get some sleep. But yeah, I pretty much tackled this one. But
yeah. Related to that, there was, I think it was Divertimento, I think was the piece that you conducted, that was like,
yeah,
we did a live watch of that in the Discord, because I was like, no, we found this. And then there was me and a few other friends who like play or used to be play in orchestras, and we were all like live reacting to your conducting.
Oh, that's so cool. I wish I had known that. Well, thank you for watching.
We all like decided we wanted it, like those that weren't currently playing in orchestras were like going to go back to orchestra because they missed being conducted. And it was just like, it was really cute. But like that was very, very impressive conducting. It was really good for it too.
Thank you.
I'm sure you probably echo this sentiment, Tangelene, that any composer starting out needs to be, really aware of the instruments' capabilities and being very much on top of orchestration. Even if you're going to end up collaborating with someone else. I think it's one of those things that maybe sometimes is overlooked when learning any sort of compositional skills.
Yeah, I think it is. Go ahead to Coco, sorry.
I was just gonna say, we get quite a few student compositions where it's clear that hasn't happened, and you get like a viola part and it's all written in the treble clef, even though it's like notes that the violin can't play.
I know. Yeah, I mean, it is definitely an important skill. And it comes with experience too, but my other thing too is, learn all those skills, but also I love to break rules. So learn the skills, but it's okay to kind of change rules a bit once you know everything.
And one of the questions that people were asking is like with MIDI keyboards and that kind of thing, because that's obviously quite a big part of it. So we're wondering what MIDI keyboard do you use? Like how many keys does it have, and like that kind of thing?
Yeah, I have the Native Instruments Mark II keyboard. It's like the newer Native Instruments keyboard, and it's 88 and it's weighted. And it has the lights. I remember for the longest time, I'm like, I just want it because of the lights. It's like blue lights. But you know what? For the longest time, I had this like Nectar keyboard. I don't know if you ever heard of the brand Nectar. It's like Nektar. It's not that great. I mean, really. It was very loud and clanky, but it was a pretty good price point for what you could get. And it had a lot of like faders. I think it was maybe a couple hundred or 300, which might sound expensive, but like the nice weighted keyboards are much more than that. And my whole thing is just work with what you've got. If you have a certain budget, find whatever works best for you. That served me well for a really long time. And yeah, work with what you got. But if you're a pianist and you really value weighted keys, I would maybe make that more of a priority. I kind of wish that I had invested in a nice weighted keyboard a bit earlier in my career. But I will say I got this only like a year ago. So yeah, so there's something to be said about that. Like I worked with what I had for a really long time. So there's no shame in it.
For someone that doesn't know this, what is the difference between the two, like the weighted keyboard versus not having it?
So the weightedness of it, it's like gonna feel closer to what a real piano will feel like. That it's like that resistance when you play, that feels more like a real piano. Whereas if it's not weighted, it's just gonna be really easy to play. It's just not gonna feel quite like the real thing. But a lot of times you're not always playing piano. It's great when you're playing piano or certain instruments that you really want that weighted feel so that your velocities, you have a lot of control over the velocity, like the different layers and how loud or soft it can be. It'll be a lot more responsive if it's weighted. But sometimes if you're playing some drums, you don't want that responsiveness. You just want to play as loud as you can and just get those notes in. So then a non-weighted keyboard might be just fine. So I would say it just depends on your needs.
Yeah.
What advice would you give like someone who's wanting to like get started with sequencing and that kind of thing?
Just start. Yeah, just start. Find any DAW, which is like digital audio workstation. That's what it stands for people who don't know. Just pick one up. Logic, Cubase, Ableton. There's so many out there. I use Logic, which I like. I kind of want to start using Cubase, but I feel like there's not one right or wrong sequencer to use. Just pick one up, start using it, and practice and start getting inspired and write some music. And YouTube's out there now. It's been out there, but I didn't always have access to YouTube when I first started. So that's a great tool for really learning anything and everything about film scoring. There's so many videos out there. So yeah, just experiment and have fun and just start.
I'm going to go back to production on Warrior Nun. Can you describe the process of your work with Simon and others on the team to do the soundtrack, like how you started in pre-production and then all the way to post?
Sure. So I had a couple early discussions with Simon, like about the characters, general character arcs, what themes he might want. He did in the early days say he wanted a Avatrice theme, so a theme for Ava and Beatrice. So that was definitely something I had in the back of my mind. And he also mentioned Lilith and how she has a really beautiful arc and her transformation. So I would say Avatrice and Lilith were the two that stuck in my mind the most, as well as Adriel, just because he's such a big part of season 2. So I basically really dug into the scripts and started coming up with some ideas to the scripts. And then I sent some of those ideas over to Simon when he was shooting in Spain. So sometimes it would be like, maybe a week or two before I'd gotten a response because, he's in the midst of shooting. But he was always really responsive of my ideas and he liked them too. And he did mention that Adriel's character, William, brought a really cool like rock star performance to his role. So that's definitely something I kept in the back of my mind too, because I didn't like see the footage or anything yet. All I could do was just take that information and go, okay, I wonder what he means by that. Because that could be like rock and roll, right? Or a more kind of all about him sort of persona. And so once I started receiving the daily footage that they had been shooting each day is when I kind of got a feel for Adriel's character and knew I wanted to really showcase solo violin and in that more virtuoso style for Adriel. So the dailies were a great part of my process because I could see how the actors really took the performances to another level, and I got really inspired by the architecture, the scenery, and the performances. So I continued writing a few more ideas to the dailies. Jillian and Michael too, a lot of their scenes like with the arc and just them together, I got inspired by as well. So I wrote their theme to the dailies too. And then by the time we got to post-production, I had some of these themes already written to kind of inspire me once I had to kind of go full force on that, TV schedule, which is pretty go, go, go. So by that point, I, just writing, had some of these thematic materials already in the back of my head and incorporated those themes into my score as I would go through each episode. And it was pretty seamless. I would write everything, send it to Kevin, the music editor. He would put everything to QuickTimes, deliver it to Simon, and then Simon would give his feedback. Either he would approve them, or maybe had one or two notes, and then I would address those, would go back to him, he would approve it, and then on to the mixes, deliverables, and then next episode. And sometimes next episodes would kind of overlap with delivery. So it's kind of just a go, go, go schedule.
Did you see some of these stunt work in the dailies?
Yes.
And so
it was so cool.
We had the stunt team on recently, and they just talked about how phenomenal the crew was. But did that inspire some of the cues that you wrote?
Definitely. I thought it was really fun to also see like the coordination between everyone was really fun, and seeing kind of the different angles of the fight sequences was also really fun. And I could get the timing to the stunts. So I think I did write a couple ideas for fight scenes to the dailies. I think maybe I was inspired by Lilith's fight scene, as well as the third fight sequence too. When Ava just goes crazy and then Beatrice gets mad at her, that one. I was inspired by that one as well. But it is different once it's like all edited together. It's a different kind of pulse. Just because good proper editing really like makes the fight sequence as well.
You use technology so brilliantly in your work and integrate it seamlessly in your scores with along with those live orchestral elements. You also process and manipulate sounds and all of the above. It's really perfect for a sci-fi show. With this, how important is technology to you as a composer?
It's really important to me. I just like to move forward, and there's so many really fun synthesizers and ways to manipulate music and sound, and it keeps evolving. Sound keeps evolving too. It's a little bit newer to us, whereas like orchestration and traditional instruments is all of the past. And I love the idea of just incorporating both together and finding new ways to meld the two in a seamless way. So thank you for saying that. It was definitely a really big part of my process for Warrior Nun. yeah, I used a ton of synthesizers, and I just had fun mostly. And I tried to just trust my ears. I would say to anyone who's a little newer to technology or synthesizers or manipulating sound and music, I would just say, like, do some research, see what types of plugins or synthesizers look interesting to you. There's no right or wrong. Just start using things and trust your ears at first, because you can be all detailed about the math, about the different algorithms, and yeah, one thing might be right technically, but it might not be right for the sound you're going for or the mood you're going for. So trusting your ears and trusting like what your preferences are is going to be so much more important for crafting your own sound and sticking out from other people. And try to surround yourself with like people whose opinions you really trust and value, because it is important to grow and to understand your strengths and your weaknesses, and to just be real about those, and just take the time to develop more and to learn more and to grow more. And that comes with, yeah, technical skills, musical development, but also life experience too.
So we know your friend Abby, I believe it was, played the virtuosic Adriel theme, and some other like solo violin parts. But how much of the score was like played by session musicians, and how much of it was like MIDI sound kind of things?
Mm-hmm. It's sort of a blend, I would say. Yeah, a lot of times and especially with like the schedule, I'm a huge proponent of blending synth with live, with actual synthesizers and manipulation. I learned about that when I was at Hans's studio, because I saw a couple of different composers, you know, like just layering like a couple instruments with their synth strings, and just a lot of kind of bringing people in, individual collaborations, and then really great blending. And I learned a lot about that too from my mentor, who was just an amazing sequencer. Like he could just make his session, like his MIDI orchestral sessions, sound like the real thing. I was always so impressed by that. And that's a great skill too. I mean, obviously it's more fun to just record live instruments all the time, but especially when you're starting out, if you can get those chops really high, and make your, you know, string sound really real, that's a great skill, especially if you're working on some student films that can't afford maybe orchestra. You can kind of fake it and maybe record a couple string players and you'll get a great result.
Yeah, about blending, I think I was doing some research last year for like a project I had to do, and I think it was kind of saying that quite a lot of the time, if you have some real players in there, it will offer some imperfections that won't be like given by the MIDI, and it can fool the human ear into thinking that all the rest of it is actual real players as well. So it's like you can create a real sound just with like few performers, just by like layering it right and making sure that it's not all perfectly quantized, because humans
exactly aren't. I have heard that before too, to my ears, is when I think something is MIDI but it's real. And I think also that brings up a good point about like the mix, making sure you have the mix dialed in a good place. But yeah, it can go either way. That's the thing. It's, for a while I used to actually not quantize my strings too. So that's funny that you brought that up, Coco, because yeah, you want that sort of real experience. And if you quantize things too much with strings or other orchestral elements, it's going to just sound really weird. Especially if you play a string patch or a brass patch, the attack tends to sometimes be like a little slower before you hear. Yeah, just because they want to capture that realism. If it started right as you play it, it wouldn't sound natural, but you have to like shift everything, or what you can do too in your, I don't know, depending on what DAW you're using, you can kind of add delay or where it comes earlier so that everything can come at a certain percentage earlier. I'm sure you know that already though, but
That's cool, thank you.
I don't, so thank you.
But you don't, but now you do.
Yes, I do.
This is just quickly going into media writing. So essentially with media writing, the idea is to serve the story and the characters. It's been said that content dictates form. As in the music or the style of music that you choose is all dependent on what's happening in the situation and with the characters. So what do you think is the biggest draw of writing for media for you?
I think it's being able to flex my musical muscles in different genres, different moods, and yeah, just constantly learning and growing during that process. I think is the biggest draw for me. I don't have to stick to one type of style. I can work on, like a drama, supernatural action show, or I can work on a horror movie or a comedy. And I think that's something that I'd always been interested in, even in my early college days, was learning different styles and trying things that might make me a little nervous or scared because maybe I don't know a certain instrument or a certain genre, but realizing that once I try it, that I'm going to learn something from that I can incorporate to a different genre or style of music.
So there are a lot of different people who are contributing. In general, there's the film or the TV media itself, and then there's the music side of things. I'm not sure if you agree, but those two elements of the TV and the film itself and music seem to be really leaving space for each other. So there's this lovely thing where there's enough space, to put the media and the music together to create this complete thing in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like every film or show is different. Sometimes it does benefit from having a lot of music, like animations, or especially like older animation or like a Disney animation. It can be fun when there is a lot of music, whereas maybe a really raw drama might not need any music or very minimal music for like a montage sequence. And I think that's a fun thing about storytelling is every project is so specific. And it's great but overall I do think I agree with you. It's great to have those ebbs and flows and kind of sculpt around the situation or the acting and understand when certain elements should shine more or certain performances are really standing great on their own without a lot of music, or and then pumping it up on an action sequence and just having go like wall to wall music. So that is a fun part because you really have to be a producer in that sense and kind of take a step back and say, yeah, I'm the composer, but it's not my job to just play every note on the piano. It's to understand the story and what works for the story and the scene.
So I want to briefly talk about Ava's fall and, Ava and Beatrice's scene right after. So the scoring during this scene reminded some of us in the fandom of classic Italian scoring. And so we're wondering whether you sort of were paying homage or whether you actually really liked this kind of classical scoring, or whether maybe you thought that sound and the beautiful, European setting for Warrior Nun might have been the kind of scoring that really worked well for that theme.
Well, first of all, thank you for throwing out those references, like both so beautiful. So I really appreciate that. I mean, I definitely have all of those influences, and I love the style in general. But when I wrote it, I wouldn't say I was drawing specifically from a style or a piece of music. It kind of just came to me organically, the theme and the way I went about it. So yeah, I would say it's just what came to me. But I wasn't listening to those references, but I mean, it's so cool to hear that that's what you thought. What I will say though is I definitely did want to give it like a classic romantic feel, and I did want it to feel like kind of a classic love story.
So sort of like relating to things just like coming to you. So how large a part does improvisation play in your compositional process?
A huge part. I would say almost indefinitely is a huge part of my process. I like to just feel like get in the moment, you know what I mean? And then that's when the music feels the most authentic to me, is when I can get myself in those in a place where it feels instinctual and not too micromanaged in my head. I like when it feels natural, and when I'm not in like any anxious state. I feel like sometimes when you're in an anxious state is when it doesn't come out organically, it doesn't feel authentic. It just, there's other thoughts behind it. So yeah, whenever I can get myself in a bit more of a grounded place is when it just comes out in a more improvisational way.
Do you work better under pressure or the flow, having, the time and space?
That's a great question. Oof, I would say both. When I'm coming up with like themes, I think it's a little bit better if I have a little space, which is why I do like to get on board earlier when I can. Or to just, no matter what, when I'm coming up with themes, to make sure I'm giving myself enough time to spend with those themes, because you want to sit with them and you want to really feel that they're right for certain characters or situations. But when I'm writing a large quantity of music, I do prefer the pressure, just because it forces me to not overthink and just trust my instincts and just get it finished. So both.
Yeah. Are there any times that you just rip it up and are just like, no?
Not as much as you would think. I feel like now I'm in a place where I try to just make sure that I'm being conscious, kind of like paper, right? Digitally conscious, or maybe in terms of how much space I'm consuming on my computer. I guess I could relate it in that sense. But I try to be a bit conscious about what I'm playing or what I'm laying down, and that I'm being intentional about it. So I would say I kind of try to filter that in through my brain first. If it's not going to be in that good space, I'm just not going to write. I'm going to take a break. And I can already kind of feel that when I'm at my desk. But, every once in a while, yeah, I'll be trying a certain scene and it might not be working. And that's when I know I have to take a step away and revisit it in maybe an hour and take a break and have some food or drink some water.
Another one of the favorite cues in the fandom is the Saving Miguel score. It has this percussive part that really slaps, and then this awesome bass synth part. It's really a short score, but it has everything. So where do you start when you're creating, kind of this really big action sequence cue?
I do try to start with percussion to make sure that I have that groove, really that drum foundation there. Especially because I love like varying rhythms, and I don't always like having things so straight. I love playing the syncopation and different rhythmic values. So I really like to dial that in on the drums and percussion first whenever I can. And for that specific one, that's what I did. I really tried to dial in the percussion group first. And then I believe I laid down the bass after, because, you know, bass and drums, they're both really rhythmic and groove based. So I wanted to make sure that those two elements really gelled well together. And then after that, I added the more orchestral elements and other various synth elements too. But it did really benefit from a good mix. And something else I like to tell other musicians is try to mix as you go, so that by the time you actually do the final mix, it's already in a good place. It'll help you.
I do not do that, so I will stop.
It's an important skill. I think too, especially when you hire mixers, that you have a good understanding of the different frequencies and your own personal preference, because it's very subjective.
Do you have a particular score from season 2 that resonates with you?
I definitely love Ava in Training, just because I wrote that cue to the dailies, and that was just when I felt so inspired, and I knew that season 2 was just going to be amazing, and that the execution was just like impeccable. I felt that through Alba Baptista's performance in that scene, and that was like the most inspiring one to me.
I actually got chills watching that scene.
Oh, so did I. Well, when even before like I wrote the music, I already got chills from her performance. You're rooting for her so much in that scene, and it's a great, you know, symbolically, it's great because it just shows potential. Like no matter what the end result is, it's about knowing there's that potential and like putting it into executing it in the process, in the experience, in the journey.
Do you have a favorite score as a viewer or a fan? I know you said that you like movies.
Oh, like one of my favorite scores, or
yes.
I have so many. It's so hard. Let's think about maybe in like recent years, what kind of scores are inspiring to me. You know, I was really into the score for the show Severance. I thought that was a really fun score. I don't know if you all have ever seen that show. It's on Apple TV. But it's a bit different. It's like mostly piano based, and it's like piano and synths mostly, like bass. Which I thought was a little bit different. And it's playing like the whole time, or at least there's a certain point in the show where like the music never stops. So I thought it was really interesting in that sense, this just propelling piano score, and then the bass that just, I don't know, it was a bit different for shows that I've seen recently. And The White Lotus, I love the score too. I think it's fun.
I think you'd like the Doctor Who theme, but
oh right,
but like the especially the music by Murray Gold. So that's very heavily like orchestral based, and like the music for that was like the main reason that I want to go into this kind of thing, because there's so many character themes, and the way that they're used. They just keep popping up, and it's like inside jokes and that kind of thing, which is why I went like feral when there was like there's themes in Warrior Nun too. So
and I have to say, like, thank you. And Coco is so cool to have analyzed all the themes. I remember when I saw that, I thought it was just, I was very honored that you took the time to go through all the themes.
So when you are like writing, do you start notating it, like rather than just MIDI, but like notating it early in the process, or like any point in that, or do you just work with like MIDI initially?
I work with MIDI initially. Yeah, I notate later, or get someone else to do it. I definitely enjoy MIDI more, I would say. I'm like, I guess, a more modern approach.
I see. I sometimes find it's quite hard to work out harmonies when you're looking at just like this little piano bar and the key, like the notes that you're pressing, that you've pressed, and it just, sometimes it helps to see it like written out as like a player would, I suppose. But,
I know what you mean. I feel like there are a lot of composers who still enjoy seeing things with proper notation, and when they're kind of doing certain harmonies. I feel like I look at the MIDI, I like process it through the MIDI shapes. You know, you can still see if you're doing some parallel octaves, even though like, yeah, they're not always good, but you can still use them if you want, if it's the right context. But if you wanted to see that you were doing those and you didn't want to do that, you can still see it in the, you know, with the MIDI, your MIDI notes. So that's kind of how I look at things, especially because Warrior Nun does have a lot of classical elements. So you do want to make sure you're not breaking all the classical rules. You still want to stay in that space. So I would, yeah, kind of open up my MIDI region and just take a look at the notes and see the shapes, if they're moving in a proper direction, and just.
When you do like notate anything, do you use like Sibelius or a different one? What software do you use for that?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of use a bunch of things. I would say I started first in Finale, so I'm more comfortable with Finale, but I'm trying to learn Sibelius now. And I'm really strong at using the Logic score editor. I mean, if it's like me having my violinist come by, like, and I finished a cue maybe an hour before she comes. If I'm recording her in Logic, sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, I'll just pull up the region, take a look at it. But I've gotten really good with, you know, of course, I always have my dynamics, I always have my little hairpins and accents, whatever I need to do. If you spend enough time in the Logic score editor, you can get the same things done. And if you're doing something quick, it works. I used to see Ramin Djawadi's team use the Logic score editor for having, like, you know, if someone quickly came in fast to record, they would use it sometimes. Or even my mentor, Bobby, he was actually the one who told me, oh yeah, I just use the Logic score editor. So it works. Whatever you have, it works. But in terms of, yeah, like fully fleshing things out, I would say, yeah, Sibelius is definitely the more popular choice. But I mean, it depends. If you really, I mean, it's good to definitely know all these tools, especially if you're really into orchestration. Like, it's really good to be good at Sibelius, I would say. I in terms of the full score view for different instruments, I don't know if it would be good for that. But if you're just doing quick recordings of individual instruments, you can definitely get away with the Logic score editor just for separate parts.
I think if you like click and select all and then you view the score, then you can see all of them. But I think
it sometimes looks weird.
It's so weird. I tried to, like, because I was playing my own like part, because after the research I had to like do the thing I'd researched. And so I like played my own like viola melody and then like multi-tracked myself for the other stuff as well. But when I tried to just use the Logic thing, you just see all these like slurs over the bar line. Like,
oh, right. Yeah, the different slurs. I think there's like different options. Like when you open it, it's like, I think it's at the top right. There's like different options that you can select that will be like piano mode, like different types of modes. Yeah. So like if I'm doing, there's definitely an option there. Like, cause I know when I would notate a piano part, you can select like piano and it will move things properly.
That's very helpful.
You'll have to, it's in there somewhere, I believe, that you can do that, or just you'll have to if you want to do maybe like slur something, or it's not doing it properly, you could also like cut the MIDI note and then add your own like slur over top to connect. Do you know what I mean? To connect certain, you can do that too. It's all about finding the weird little quirks.
I was just thinking,
Adrian.
yeah, I was just
You're like,
thinking,
what are you talking about?
we need I think several fans would love to have a session with you of like being taught by you. Hey, do it this way, that way.
Oh, I'm sure I could learn. I'm sure I could learn a lot from everyone.
Going back to the score briefly, for me, and I think for a lot of people in the fandom, one of the most emotional moments is when we've lost Mary. And so, we were just trying to think a little bit more about that particular cue. And I was thinking maybe, it had something to do with a little bit of the loss of innocence. Ava and B, they've kind of had to go back to reality. The Holy War is coming. They've had to leave their life in Switzerland. So for you, were you thinking about any particular elements of the story when you were writing that cue in particular?
I mean, I just wanted it to feel like gut-wrenching and just like heartbreaking, but also massive, just because Mary deserves that, like, that massive choir vibe. And I do, you know what, like, I did make it big, but Simon did say, like, it has to be really big. Like, I definitely pushed it, like whatever he said big, I like pushed it even more than that, because, and that's another actually great tip too for notes, for tackling notes, is if you get a note that's like, I want this bigger, it's better to go even bigger than what you think big is, because sometimes I feel like a lot of times that's usually what they mean. So yeah, I went even bigger per Simon for that scene, just because it's like the slow-mo and it's just this heartbreaking news that we hear. But I knew I wanted choir, and also for the scene before with Beatrice and Ava on the couch, I did make that really intimate, and it's sort of chord wise their elements of their theme for that whole fighting sequence, and then the couch when they're sitting down and they're having that moment together. I made the intention of having it a little bit more bare to show their performance, because it's like this really vulnerable moment between both of them, and their relationship is developing too at that moment, and you're really feeling it between them, and you're rooting for them. I was like, oh yes, the start, the beginning.
So is that where the dailies came in for you on that example?
I don't think I wrote, no, I didn't write We've Lost Mary to the dailies. That was to picture, because when I received the dailies, the other thing is, when you receive the dailies, you still have to make sure you're keeping track in the script. So like sometimes the way things are filmed is not always in the order of the script. So I think maybe I saw the scene of just Beatrice and Ava like fighting, and then Beatrice crying, or they're both crying. But that paired with Mother Superior and Camilla like breaking down, I didn't know where that was it was probably filmed on another day. So that really benefited with having me see it edited together. And yeah, that's when I wrote We've Lost Mary.
So how much time did you have to do that then?
To do that scene?
Yeah.
I mean, I probably did that in like a day or something. I mean, maybe 2 days. And then I recorded, and then I got some notes from Simon, and then I turned around probably in another day. It moves quick. Yeah, you have to definitely like pump these cues out. Well, you know, I learned because I was in this Sundance initiative where I was a fellow, and that's when I learned a lot about how to approach notes from directors or showrunners. Is because one of my mentors was Jermaine Franco, who's an amazing composer. She did Encanto. And I actually knew her when I was working at Hansa's studio because she was doing a lot of work over there because she used to work for John Powell for a long time. And it's awesome seeing how, like, what she's doing now. And she's very inspiring. Yeah, I recommend like checking her out if you haven't already. But I remember I did this short film called Eddie Ordinary Day. It's like an experimental animation. I think it's probably on YouTube somewhere. But there was like an end scene, and I think it was fun because the mentors would give notes as well as the director of the short. And I think she said something about pushing something bigger, and then I think I did the note and it wasn't as big as she wanted. And I think she said, you know, hey, this is like a really good really good advice that she wanted to give was, you know, a lot of times when she works with studios, she works with like Disney, tons of big people. She said, if like someone says, I want it big, just try to give bigger than they say, because a lot of times that'll nail it. What you might think is big is usually like a little under what they think. But if you do it a little bigger and then they say, oh, let's pull it back a little bit, it's a little easier to do that, I find. Then, okay, and they'll make it even bigger. And they're just like, okay, well, you could probably tackle like one less note by going a little bigger and then playing back.
So like, how do you go about writing so emotional music? So do you see it as creating emotions in the audience, or do you see it as enhancing emotions that are already on the screen?
I'm hopefully just enhancing emotions that are already on screen. Sometimes when you're working on short films though, they need help. A little bit of help. They might not be quite as experienced yet, or maybe they're working with actors who are still, you know, developing their skills, and they might need a little help with emotion. So sometimes, and it's still a great skill to learn to help make something better. Hopefully you're not always doing that. But yeah, I would say for like short films or newer filmmakers, sometimes you do have to create something that might not be there. I prefer when I'm just enhancing though.
When we were talking to Lindsay Wolfington, we briefly talked about the relationship between, you know, the music supervisor and the composer. And we were mentioning how, you know, the sensibility that she has to have to understand, you know, what should go where, what should be enhanced, what should be created, which is exactly the same sensibility that you need to have that unique sort of ability to mold what's there, but also to understand inherently what this situation demands and what the script demands in terms of, you know, emotions.
Yeah, and it's even more interesting for supervisors because they're dealing a lot with like lyrics, and they want to make sure that the lyrics also have are reflective of the story, or maybe they can have some extra hidden meaning. So that's a cool part of being a music supervisor. I love working with Lindsay. I got to work with her twice in 2022.
So how did you all work together? Like, how did that process go?
Oh, the collaboration. It was pretty much in the spotting sessions. So basically when we have spotting sessions, Simon and the other creative team mostly Simon though, will give his direction for all the scenes. If there's already pre-existing music in there, like a sync license, he'll say if he likes it or if he wants to change it to something else. And then he'll also talk about the temp music, so like the temporary music that they'll put in for underscore, and he'll talk about whether that's working or whether he wants it to be a bit different, or if it's not working, what kind of mood he wants it to evoke. But a lot of times we'll kind of go through it, and if something's working, we'll just keep going, and it'll be assumed that whatever temp music in there is a great starting point. And then yeah, that's pretty much how it goes. Simon is the leader, he's the showrunner, so it's really his overall vision, and then it's up to me and Lindsay to take that direction and then you know, of course, make it our own and give our own take on it.
I can't remember if it was Simon. I think it was Simon said in an interview that he had heard Him for Her so many times that he came to you asking, or maybe it was in one of your interviews, if you should put something in, and you were like, I think this works, but I can do it if you want.
Yeah, exactly. It was pretty unanimous that we all loved Him for Her. But yeah, of course, and this happens a lot, it's showrunners and directors, like they've been watching these cuts and they've been sitting with these scenes for so long, so much longer than we do. So yeah, sometimes they just want to hear something new, or they want confirmation that it's the right decision. So yeah, he did really love it. I think he was just curious, yeah, if there was a world where it would be something else. I did take a stab at it though. I made kind of like a more it was kind of like a more epic version of Ava's Fall, kind of like more in that style that you were saying, like the Italian thing, but it was like a fuller romantic version of that, and which is very different than Him for Her, like complete opposite, similar in function, but completely different approach. And while he did like it, he did, you know, we both agreed. I had said too, like, I feel like this is the right song, Him for Her. Like everyone thought it was perfect. But you know, it's still important to give options, and I'm always gonna give options. So, but yeah, in the end, we all agreed Him for Her, like this, it's the perfect song, and they deserve a song for that moment. So I think it's perfect, and I'm so glad it's there.